Welcome to Light Boxes, a football show. I'm your host, Rob Ballantine. My goal for this channel is to help you think outside the box about the NFL. And today, I'll be dissecting all four teams in the AFC East. I'm going to cover the good, the bad, and the most intriguing things about each franchise as a best way to tell the whole story about each team's outlook going into 2025. This is my fourth ever video, and I really appreciate you being here for the beginning of this channel. It would mean a lot if you like and subscribe and share this video around to friends and family and other NFL fans just like you. All right, let's dive into the AFC East. Let's take a look at the betting odds for this division. If you want a deeper breakdown of how betting odds work, check out the beginning of my NFC South preview, but brief overview. Numbers for betting odds are going to start at the lowest end with 100. So if something is plus 100 or minus 110, that's kind of the middle ground. That's a coin flip on either side of the betting line. The bigger a number is with a minus in front of it, the more likely it is, the less that the sportsbook will pay you. So the Buffalo Bills have minus 850 odds to make the playoffs. It's the best in the entire NFL. So that's saying it's very likely with minus 850. And a plus and then a large number that is less likely to happen. The book will pay you more. So the Jets, for example, are plus 1,700 to win this division. That's one of the longest odds for any division in the NFL. So plus and a big number, less likely to happen, bigger payout. The most telling thing about this division is in the win total column because the Bills won 13 games last year. Their over-under is 12.5. Skipping down to the Dolphins, they won 8 games last year. Their over is 8.5. The Jets won 5 games last year. Their over-under is 5.5. The sportsbooks are saying that those three teams are pretty similar to what they were last year, but the New England Patriots won 4 games in 2024, and their win total jumped all the way up to 8.5. It's one of the biggest leaps in the NFL, and I'll be curious to see if they can live up to that, but we'll cover that later. First, let's look at the opponents that each of these teams will face. The AFC East plays the entire AFC North and NFC South this year. From that group of 8 teams, the Ravens are the only truly fearsome opponent. The Bengals and the Bucs both have high upside, but their floors are lower than that of the Ravens. The Steelers, they're sort of a discount version of that as well. And the rest of those teams, you really don't know what we're going to get. So that's not a brutal schedule. And the AFC East gets to host their most fearsome, unique opponents. So the Bills get to host the Chiefs and the Eagles. The Jets get to host the Broncos and the Cowboys. That is definitely a boon for this group. Their road game, as far as unique opponents go, they'll be traveling to an AFC South team. Some of those teams are good, but none of those stadiums are notably difficult places to play. So this worked out really well for our teams that we're studying today. Let's first study the New York Jets. There's a lot of reason to feel confidence in the new staff, although Woody Johnson is still the owner. So as long as he can get out of the way and let this new staff build a culture, things are looking up. Aaron Glenn left Detroit as their defensive coordinator the same season that Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator, took the Bears job. So Detroit lost both their coordinators. And Ben Johnson often gets more hype as a hotshot play caller. But if anybody's going to replicate the kneecap biting mentality of those Detroit Lions, I'd put my money on Aaron Glenn to do that in New York. Glenn is no nonsense, and it was also a no-nonsense smart move to lock up wide receiver Garrett Wilson and cornerback Sauce Gardner to contracts. They were drafted in the first round of the 2022 draft, and the new regime could have come in and said, well, we're going to evaluate everything, we're going to slow roll this. You shouldn't do that. These are great players who would be even better if there was a better ecosystem in New York. So the new regime, Darren Moogie coming in as GM and giving contracts that these players earned really sets the tone for saying, hey, you've put your sweat equity into the New York Jets and we're going to reward you. Now, Sauce Gardner is now the highest paid cornerback in the league, and some people will scoff at that because he had a down year in 2024. But cornerback is volatile, and he is a really talented player, so I trust him to live up to that. And then Garrett Wilson received a 4-year, $130 million contract that puts him 5th amongst wideouts right now in average annual value. But that's going to look a lot better as more wide receiver contracts come in. There's a lot of guys who are coming down the pike that are going to get paid and push Garrett Wilson further down the list. And he's a really fantastic player. So I think they got good deals, and it was good business to lock up these budding superstars. And the way they've committed to the offensive line has also been really good to see. This team knows it's rebuilding, and the contracts they just gave out don't contradict that. They spent their 7th overall pick on right tackle Armand Membou out of Missouri, and that goes along really well with last year's pick from the old regime, Olu Fashanu, the left tackle out of Penn State. Those two players can grow together as anchors of the line. And there's a couple still young, promising players on the interior, center Joe Tipman and guard Elijah Vera Tucker, as long as Vera Tucker can stay healthy. So there's a lot that you can build around and then place a quarterback into that later. They'll probably draft one in 2026 or 2027. So I love that they've committed to that and not try to microwave things too early. Take some offensive line prospects, build that up before you worry about competing. Now, something bad about where this franchise is they have to start Brandon Stephens as their cornerback too. Brandon Stephens was the solitary weak point in the Ravens secondary, and it was a real problem for them. Now, the Jets only really have Sauce Gardner. That's a plus player in that secondary, so Brandon Stephens coming in might not seem as glaring a weakness because there's other places for offenses to pick on, but it's not good, and it's representative of where this team is in their timeline. They needed to lock up their number one cornerback, but they're pretty thin behind Sauce Gardner, and that's one of the reasons they're not going to win too many games. The exact same thing could be said for this receiving core. Garrett Wilson is the focal point, but behind him, the wide receiver 2 job might belong to Allen Lazard. That's pretty scary. The only value that Allen Lazard provided last year was his particular chemistry with Aaron Rodgers, his ability to be where Rodgers expects him to be. Aaron Rodgers isn't the quarterback anymore, though, and I don't really see what Allen Lazard would bring to a Justin Fields-led team. It could also be Josh Reynolds. He was good in Detroit, but he didn't have a great season with the Broncos. Then he dealt with some injuries. He actually got shot at one point. He only had minor injuries from that. But Josh Reynolds wasn't able to stick in Denver. They cut him midway through the season anyway. He didn't do much in Jacksonville when they picked him up. And so the Jets picking out Josh Reynolds, I don't really see how that's much of a high upside move. He's 30 years old now as well, so hard to see any of these other receivers contributing meaningfully unless they resurrect Malachi Corley after a really tough rookie season. But this is a thin depth chart in the receiving room. One of the most intriguing things about the Jets is not only the decision to bring in Justin Fields as their starting quarterback, but also the financial commitment that they made to him. I have no problem with them passing on the 2025 rookie class and opting to go with a veteran bridge option instead. But there are cheaper ways to go about a veteran bridge option. A couple years ago, Baker Mayfield was given a 1-year, $4 million prove-it deal by the Buccaneers after Tom Brady retired. He then earned a bigger contract, but that was the start of it. Sam Darnold, last year with the Vikings, given a 1-year, $10 million deal, and he earned 3 more years, $100 million with the Seahawks in free agency this year. So Justin Fields could be on that trajectory as a former first-round pick with tons of upside. But I and a lot of people think Justin Fields has reached most of his ceiling. So the fact that the Jets gave him 2 years, $40 million right now with $30 million guaranteed, that's an interesting bet. It could work out. It also could be reeking of Aaron Glenn, former DC of Detroit, remembering the feelings he had about game planning against Justin Fields and his rushing ability twice a year when Fields was the Chicago Bears quarterback. So we'll see how right they were to have this much faith in Justin Fields. And then there's question marks around why Detroit let Tanner Engstrand go to be the OC in New York, because Tanner Engstrand was an assistant coach in Detroit and was seemingly the heir apparent to take over the offensive coordinator duties once Ben Johnson left. And it was years. Ben Johnson was flirting with head coaching openings for 3 off seasons before he took the Bears job. So Tanner Engstrand was always discussed as the person to take over. Once rubber met the road, though, they decided to let Engstrand go to New York with Aaron Glenn, and they opted to hire Johnny Morton from outside the building. He had been an assistant of Sean Payton's in Denver. So we'll see what that means. Now, if Engstrand's offense looks amazing in New York, then that's a tough beat for the Lions. But if it doesn't look great, maybe the Lions knew something all along about Engstrand's ultimate potential, and the Engstrand move will mean a lot for New York's future. For each team, I'll designate what I call the fulcrum. It's the person or unit that is going to be most responsible for the success or failure of the team in 2025. For the New York Jets, the fulcrum is Aaron Glenn and his defensive staff's ability to turn their top edge rushers, Jermaine Johnson, number 11, and Will McDonald, number 99, into 3-down players. They were each first-round picks in the 2022 and 2023 drafts, respectively. And they are good pass rushers. Will McDonald racked up a bunch of sacks last year. Jermaine Johnson has been battling injury issues, but he looks like a promising pass rusher and ascending player when he's on the field. But neither really stopped the run very well. This team doesn't have a ton of run defenders. Quinnen Williams is good at that, but he's much better as a pass rusher on the interior. So turning these edge players into real run stuffers will allow the Jets to be in favorable down and distances where they can unlock that pass rush. If you don't stop the run on first and second down, you're never going to get an ideal pass rush situation. So that will muddy their ability to be impactful players. The Lions, those defenses, always had stout run defenders. That was their calling card, along with really fierce play in the secondary. But the Jets don't have that right now unless Aaron Glenn can unlock it. So if he can get these players playing that way, having a 3-down mentality and a really good run stuffing approach, then the Jets defense could be pretty good this year. With a line of 5.5 wins, I'll take the over on the Jets. Now, the betting public also agrees with that, since the line is down to -150 that the Jets will clear that line, and betting with the public too often can be a bad proposition. But it's too easy to see Aaron Glenn having a steadying impact on this franchise, and for all of the questions about Justin Fields' ceiling, he did go 4-2 with the Pittsburgh Steelers in his starts, and he went 7-10 in his final season in Chicago. Both of those teams had flawed offensive rosters around Fields just like this one, but this Jet squad could have the best offensive line Fields has ever played behind. So if the offense is serviceable and Aaron Glenn can get the defense moving in the right direction, I see this team winning 6 or more games, maybe a respectable 7 or 8 wins, and then feeling really good about their prospects for 2026. On to the Miami Dolphins now. This squad has a lot more top-end talent than the New York Jets, but the Jets benefit from a clean slate and lower expectations. This is a prove-it year for the brass in Miami, because on the last night of the regular season, the owner came out and said, "We will not be making a change at head coach or GM. We are sticking with these guys." You don't bother saying that if it's not a consideration. It's not like the Chiefs had to come out and say, "We're sticking with Andy Reid and Brett Veach." That's just not a thing you bother saying unless you're considering making a change. So clearly, these two in Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel need to have a really good year on the field if they're going to keep their jobs and be the ones to steer Miami into a successful future. If the 2025 Dolphins are to be successful, it's probably going to rely on a potent pass rush. There's a lot of talent on this line. Chop Robinson had a really promising second half of his rookie season last year, so he could be one of the anchors of it. Zach Sealer is an awesome interior pass rusher. And then it depends on the health of Jalen Phillips, who missed 22 games across the past 2 seasons, and Bradley Chubb, who missed all of last season. If they're healthy this year, which they've both had a good amount of time to recover from their injuries and should be fine for the 2025 season, then there's a ton of pieces to rotate through and generate sacks and pressures. And Miami took Kenneth Grant 13th overall in the first round of this draft. I think that was a bit of a reach relative to Grant's upside, but he's huge as an interior defensive lineman. So if he can help them on rundowns and get this team into better pass rushing situations, everything could be clicking for this defensive line. And thankfully, they have defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver pulling the strings. Miami's defense was sneaky good at times last year because Weaver, who's been receiving moderate consideration for head coaching openings, is a really good play caller. He has good sense about him, and he connects really well with his players. He shows that leadership and malleability that are requirements for head coaches that also lends himself to being a good defensive coordinator. So Miami's lucky that he didn't leave this year, but they get to capitalize on him for at least one more year. But what Weaver is working with in the secondary is pretty rough, and I don't really get the plan. Now, cornerback Jalen Ramsey requested a trade, and Miami opted to avoid any headaches with him. And I do get trading him for another veteran in Minkah Fitzpatrick. This does make the secondary 2 years younger and $4 million cheaper, and you don't get appreciably bad. You don't just become a bottom of the league secondary. Unless you already were one, because I don't know what else they have in the secondary to feel good about. They let Javon Holland walk in free agency, and so there's almost nobody you can trust other than Fitzpatrick. But Fitzpatrick isn't as versatile a player as Ramsey. The age cliff might come for Jalen Ramsey, and then it really looks like a good decision. But Jalen Ramsey had a particular way of papering over holes in the secondary. He can wear a lot of hats, and that would have helped the young players come along where they have more defined roles in the secondary, not needing to take on so many responsibilities at once. Now, I think a lot of pressure goes on these young cornerbacks, and this could just be a pretty bad secondary. It might have been with Ramsey in the fold, but I certainly have less faith in it now. Both offensive tackle spots are a weak point now with Teron Armstead having retired. Now, the interior of the offensive line is actually better than I was expecting. It's not great, but pulling James Daniels in as a free agent from Pittsburgh and then drafting Jonah Savainea out of Arizona this year, those shore up the guard spots. They might have overpaid for Big Jonah by trading up in the draft to get him, but at least it makes the line better now, and they have Aaron Brewer as a center and Liam Eichenberg as another guard option. But at offensive tackle, it's pretty much just Patrick Paul and Austin Jackson, and that's tough. They are below replacement level right now as pass protectors, and they're not plus run blockers. You need the pass protecting to keep Tua Tagovailoa as your quarterback upright. But in the run game, it's almost more important because the Miami Dolphins have relied on an explosive run game, and a lot of good explosive run games have a tackle that you can deploy as a road grader to the second level to create new angles. We've seen it with the Niners and Trent Williams, the Lions and Penei Sewell, the Eagles with Jordan Mailata. These teams know how to get their offensive tackles on the move, and neither of the Dolphins players really project to do that very well. So it doesn't lend itself to a high ceiling run game. Now, another aspect of the Jalen Ramsey trade where they got Minkah Fitzpatrick is that they gave up Jonnu Smith, their star tight end from last year, who also warranted 111 targets. They gave him up in that trade, and I don't like that for business. But they signed Darren Waller out of retirement, and I'm just not yet willing to completely pan the move. Most people are completely out, and he's 32. I get it. But Darren Waller has had enough seasons of being a top 3 tight end option in this league, and he doesn't have to contribute a ton as long as the rest of the Miami offense is healthy. If Tyreek Hill can have a bounce back year, if Jalen Waddle is fully healthy, if Devon Achane continues to be one of the most explosive running backs in the league, what you're asking of Darren Waller doesn't have to be what teams asked of him in the past. So I'm just intrigued. Again, it could end up being terrible. I'm not willing yet to call it a flop until we see it. Now, the depth behind quarterback Tua Tagovailoa has always been a concern for the Dolphins. Is that better now? I'm certainly rooting for Tua to just play a fully healthy season. We all are. But it hasn't happened very often in his career. And the quarterbacks that have taken snaps behind him have really been an anchor for this team. But maybe Zach Wilson has something. It's tough to say because the beginning of his career with the New York Jets after being the number 2 overall pick was dreadful. He clearly didn't work hard enough. He clearly didn't have the maturity to handle that responsibility. But the ecosystem was terrible there. Just like Sam Darnold before him, could he leave New York, have had time to understudy? Sam Darnold did it with Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco, then went to the Vikings. Zach Wilson, understudy with Sean Payton in Denver, now comes to the Dolphins. It's a discount version because we're not expecting Wilson to be a starter, but if he gets snaps, could they be fruitful snaps? And then the Dolphins took Quinn Ewers in the 7th round of this draft. He was the quarterback at Texas, and the only reason he fell to the 7th round was injury risk, injury difficulties in 2024 in his final college season. He's not a first-round talent, I'm not saying that, but he would have gone higher had he had a better season last year, and he's more capable, likely, than Skylar Thompson was as a backup for Miami. So this is probably a better room, and if Tua has to miss time, which is unfortunately a likelihood, could this group actually steer things in the right direction? I think the real fulcrum for the Miami Dolphins has to do with none of the players. It's whether head coach Mike McDaniel can invent something new that catches defenses off guard. That is usually a lofty thing to expect, but we've seen him do it before. What he did in 2023, 2 years ago, when he really popularized the cheat motion, that was innovative stuff. And it was one of the reasons that the Dolphins' offense was so successful that year. Can he do that again? Can he invent a new wrinkle that defenses have to work to figure out throughout the season? Now, does that mean they'll make the playoffs or have playoff success if they do? No, they still have different bugaboos that they have to tackle if they make it that far. But this is one of the ways he can save his job. This is one of the ways the Dolphins can have a good season. It's if Mike McDaniel is able to cook up something brilliant in the lab. Now, the book I tend to look at, FanDuel, has the line at 8.5. Some books have the line at 7.5 wins, though. With 8.5, I take the under, but I kind of think 8 and 9 is a perfect record for this team. The schedule isn't too difficult, so I see them getting some wins that way. They also have the Colts, Patriots, and Jets early on in the season. Those teams have some upside, but some downside, and facing them early might mean they get them before they've really rounded into form. But the roster has too many high-value players with outsized injury risk, so if they lose 2 or 3 of those players, it really tanks their hopes of being a good team. So I'll go with another 8 and 9 season, therefore taking the under on the 8.5 line. People are buzzing about the New England Patriots going into 2025, and with good reason. Quarterback Drake May showed some real flashes last year in his rookie season that he may become a top 8 quarterback someday. And head coach Mike Vrabel comes in with a track record of getting the most from his teams, even when they don't have overwhelming talent on paper. That's why this team has gone from a 4-13 record last year to an 8.5 over-under win total for the 2025 season. Can they live up to all the hype? Something to love about the New England Patriots this year is how they prioritized using their draft assets to build around Drake May. Ecosystem is one of the most important things for a young quarterback, and supporting talent is a big part of that ecosystem. They used all their day 1 and 2 draft capital on offense. They took LSU's left tackle Will Campbell with the 4th overall pick. He will provide new tone and talent to an offensive line sorely missing both. 38th overall went to running back Travion Henderson out of Ohio State. He brings an explosive element that this offense hasn't had in a while. The 69th pick was Kyle Williams, a wide receiver out of Washington State, who's really good down the field and can pay off all of that arm strength that Drake May possesses. And 95th overall was Georgia center Jared Wilson. He's only a 1-year starter in college at center, but he's got a lot of talent and he could be a useful piece in the future. We don't know if any of these draft picks are actually going to work out, but the process was really good. I tend to like a lot of the players they chose, especially at the places that they got them. So this was an A+ draft from me. And if you see the glass half full version of the 2025 Pats season, the schedule is a big piece of evidence in your favor. because according to Sharp Football Analysis, they have the second easiest schedule in the entire league. And by my count, they only play 5 teams total that have a projection to make the playoffs, so minus odds to be a playoff team. They get the Bills twice, the Buccaneers, the Ravens, and the Bengals. That's it. The rest of the teams are projected to miss the playoffs more likely than make it. And their first 9 games, only one of them, week 5 against the Bills, is one of those playoff teams. The rest of them are not. So it should be a really good way for them to ramp up with some worse opponents, be in better shape by the end of the season. That could be their recipe to surpassing 8.5 wins. With all that said, though, I don't love that they're going back to the Josh McDaniels well as offensive coordinator. On the first page of the Patriots, it said that this is year 1 for McDaniels as their offensive coordinator. It's really year 14 as an OC, but this is the first year of his 3rd stint with the team. Now, previously, almost all of his success came with Tom Brady, and all of it overlapped with Bill Belichick. What Josh McDaniels brought to the table was a way to synthesize what those two geniuses were seeing and to develop a good offense around them. Now, he did have one good year of turning Mac Jones into a serviceable quarterback, but again, that overlaps with Bill Belichick too. And for all of Bill Belichick's faults, he is still a football genius. I'm not sure if Josh McDaniels provides much value in the current NFL unless he's adapted in a way that I can't predict, but he didn't show great offensive acumen when he was the head coach of the Raiders most recently. It's good, but it doesn't elevate, and I would love to see Drake May be paired with a more innovative offensive play caller, so that could curb the ceiling a bit for what this offense looks like. The real hit to the Patriots' offensive ceiling, though, is this perilously thin offensive line. Will Campbell coming in is a start, but it's not enough. The other rookie, Jared Wilson, probably isn't ready to start in the NFL, and so they signed Garrett Bradbury, but he's at best a replacement level starter. And there were too many other holes on this line to begin with. It could be just enough to keep Drake May from developing terrible habits along year 2. But if anybody goes down, it's probably too thin. And you don't want to create a world in which Drake May is rushing and Drake May is seeing ghosts out there because he's got to get the ball out before the pass rush gets home. I believe May is a tough player, but you still don't want to create that environment for him. So this offensive line worries me a ton. Former Eagles defensive tackle Milton Williams, now a Super Bowl champion, was set to become a Carolina Panther in free agency this offseason, until the Patriots swooped in with a Godfather offer and plucked him away. But now that means that the Patriots are spending 17% of their cap space on 2 defensive tackles, Williams and Christian Barmore, who they already had. That's a wide margin before the next team. The next team is the Panthers at 14%, and they would have been higher if they'd gotten Milton Williams, but no other team is even close. 11 and 10% are where the next teams fall. So is that a good investment of cap space? It could be, because running games are becoming a little more valuable than they used to be. Not as valuable as they were when Adrian Peterson won an MVP back in 2012 as a running back, but run game value has had a resurgence, so maybe shoring up the interior is the right call. Or they're overthinking it, because most of the good teams in the league put more of their cap space into their edge rush positions, because that's where they can get more potent pass rushing production. So we'll have to see on this one. Intriguing thing number 2 about the Pats is whether they have anyone on the roster who can become Drake May's guy, his number 1 wide receiver. Teams don't have to have a wide receiver 1, but it really helps a young quarterback when there's somewhere they can reliably go with the ball, someone who's going to consistently beat coverage, and then that quarterback doesn't have to read the entire progression every play, so it takes a burden off of them. The Pats are hoping it's Stephon Diggs, who they just signed in free agency. Now, Stephon Diggs played this exact role for Buffalo and Josh Allen while Josh Allen was developing. And there are shades of Josh Allen in Drake May's style of play. So that could be a really good fit. But Stephon Diggs is 31, coming off a season-ending injury with the Texans last year. And so hard to completely bet on that one paying off. There's not really anybody else on the roster you believe in becoming this. Demario Douglas is a good player, but a slot-only receiver, and that limits some of his upside. Jalen Polk and Javon Baker had really bad rookie seasons last year, but maybe the new coaching staff can get something out of them. Maybe it is the new rookie, Kyle Williams, but it will be interesting to see if anybody can really elevate into this role. Not at like a Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson level, but just at a good, solid wide receiver 1 level for Drake May. The fulcrum for the Patriots is their secondary, because there's a ton of upside here. And what if it becomes a modern no-fly zone? I mean, cornerbacks Christian Gonzalez and Carlton Davis on the outside, they could be the best cornerback duo in the league, but both have been battling injuries. Marcus Jones is a solid nickel. Jabril Peppers had a really good season at safety last year. I still keep a candle lit for Kyle Duggar. I think there's something there. So the pieces in the secondary exist. There's even depth behind them. But if they aren't playing at a top 5 secondary level, I do think that it takes the teeth out of this defense a bit. I think Mike Vrabel and his staff will bring a new presence to that defense, but they just aren't definitely a top 5 unit like some people are thinking. The secondary is where it hinges. So if they become the modern no-fly zone, then there's a ton of upside with this defense and with this team. But if they're not that, if they're not turning over the ball at an exceptional rate, if they're not limiting explosives, then I think some of the burden shifts back to the offense. And as we've talked about, that offense is still coming together. So that changes things for the Patriots' outlook. With the 8.5 win total, it's scary, but I barely lean the over. It's tough to assume that a team that won 4 games the previous year is going to more than double its win total the next. And like we've talked about, this offense will take time to round into shape. But Mike Vrabel is too sound of a head coach, and he always has his teams winning those close games that could go the other way if the coaching was less sturdy. And the schedule's just too easy. I don't think that the opponents the Patriots are facing early on are going to punish the team for having an offense that's working its way into form. So I don't see them making the playoffs. I see them just missing out, but a 9-8, maybe 10-7 record feels like the right outcome for this team. The Buffalo Bills are a captivating team. They have the best odds to win the Super Bowl right now. Now, that doesn't actually give them any meaningful leg up on teams like the Ravens or the Chiefs in their conference, but it's a reflection of how strong of a Super Bowl contender that they are. But this team, more than any other Super Bowl contender, bears the weight of massive expectations, and their GM and head coach really could get the axe if they don't deliver. They don't have to win a Super Bowl, but if they fall short of their promise for reasons that feel well within their control, the fans are going to be restless for change. So while the Bills are a strong team that should have a really good regular season, this is going to be an interesting one to watch down the stretch. Starting with the strengths of this team, and offensive coordinator Joe Brady is definitely one of them. This will be the start of his second full year as the OC. He did take over the reins midway through 2023 as the interim OC, so he's got 1.5 years experience, and he's really had a breath of fresh air effect on this offense. He's gotten the best version of quarterback Josh Allen. He's helped Josh Allen minimize the turnovers while keeping the explosive play rate high, which is the name of the game in offensive football. And he's really revitalized this running game. All of the offensive linemen understand their landmarks really well with the way Joe Brady teaches it, and he's gotten the most out of that running back room too. This really helps support Allen and keeps the ceiling high for this offense. If they have another good year like this, he's gone. He'll be a head coach somewhere. He'll be one of the hottest candidates in the next cycle. So hopefully the Bills make the most of him right now. I also really like the commitment that the Bills have made to refreshing their defensive line. Interior player Ed Oliver is fantastic, and edge Gregory Rousseau had a nice season last year, and we'll see if he can properly build upon that. But that isn't enough, and the Bills know that. They're in a conference with Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. They have to have a better D-line. And so they brought in veteran Joey Bosa. It was a low-risk, high-reward bet because they gave him a 1-year, $12 million deal. It could totally not pay off because Joey Bosa always has injury issues. He's even had some minor stuff this offseason. But if he's healthy, then that was really worth it as a contract. And they spent their second round pick on South Carolina's TJ Sanders, their third round pick on Arkansas's Landon Jackson, and their fourth round pick on Kentucky's Deone Walker. These are all good players taken with the proper value. I even thought they got Landon Jackson in the third round as a steal. So all three of these players fortify that unit. They have a good rotation. They can stay fresh because they'll constantly be playing against some of the best passing offenses when we get to December and January. So hopefully that decision-making pays off for them now. Now, the Buffalo safety room is notably weak. This is what I said about the Philadelphia Eagles too in my last video, so maybe Super Bowl contenders just tend to skimp on the safety room because they know they have to make concessions somewhere. And maybe that's an indication of you're a good team if that's where you're not spending your money. I still don't think this is a good enough safety room for most of what they need it to be. And in Buffalo's case, it has much more to do with physicality from that position than anything else. They aren't great tacklers. They don't make their presence felt in the run game. They don't take great angles when the run game or when run after catch opportunities for receivers reach their zone. I would love to see them hit harder and be a thing that defense or offenses have to game plan around, but that's just not this unit. Taylor Rapp doesn't play that way anymore now that he's gone through a couple concussions, and DeMar Hamlin and Cole Bishop have never played that way. So that's definitely a weak point for this team. And I don't really get why this franchise feels it's necessary to play hardball with running back James Cook in the contract negotiations. His contract will be up at the end of the year, and he's looking for an extension that will pay him around $15 million a year, which is high for running backs. It would put him around the same as Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's a much better player in his prime, but James Cook is 5 years younger than Derrick Henry at 26 years old. And I get that the Bills are falling into that conventional thinking of we don't want to overpay running backs. But James Cook is absolutely an engine of your offense. And if they were to take a bigger lens to this and think, well, it's not about what we pay to our running backs, it's about what we pay to our weaponry, what we pay to the skill position group overall, they'd see that they got a steal on Khalil Shakir, their ostensible wide receiver one, at $13.5 million a year. They pay Josh Palmer less than that, and pretty much everybody else is on rookie contracts or just a smaller contract as a veteran. So they don't have onerous commitments to the wide receivers or tight ends on this team. Why not pay James Cook? Part of why you have Josh Allen on a big extension is that you can move the cap numbers around with him in the later years. Make room for James Cook now because he really helps your offense go and he supports Josh Allen. It's not that Josh Allen isn't a good enough quarterback to shoulder all of the load, but why hamstring the abilities of your offense? So just focus on bringing James Cook back, have him in the fold. He's a really good player, and that is not too much to pay for his services. Now, the presence that Matt Milano can bring to this defense, what kind of form he's in for 2025, that's something very intriguing because he's always been a major factor in this defense, but he's only played 9 regular season games in 2 regular seasons, and then he had 3 playoff games this past year. He looked good in those playoff games. He brought the kind of physicality that the safety room lacks, but it's a lot to rely on that he's just going to continue that form for an entire season when health has been a big issue for him. So what Matt Milano's impact on this defense is a really big deal for the Bills. The second big thing I'm watching for with the Bills is whether wide receiver Keon Coleman, the 33rd overall pick last year, or tight end Dalton Kincaid, the 25th overall pick 2 years ago, elevates and becomes a real weapon for this offense. Now, unlike that Patriots conversation, Josh Allen isn't needing a wide receiver one in the same way, but it still helps the offense if these formerly highly drafted players develop into that piece, especially because what Khalil Shakir and Josh Palmer, the top 2 receiving targets on this team, do. It's not a big-bodied receiver with a ton of athletic talent that defenses are scared about when they're game planning. You want to have somebody that threatens the defense in different ways, and if Dalton Kincaid can develop into that in year 3, that would be the right timeline for a tight end. And if Keon Coleman can do it in year 2, that would be the right timeline for a wide receiver. They're both good players, but they had some minor injuries last year that hampered their development throughout that season. So we'll see what they look like and how they can lift this offense. Ultimately, this is a deep squad with very little turnover from last year and one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So it's hard to find a fulcrum on the roster. I think the fulcrum for this team is whether they play well enough to get home field advantage, because playoffs and a Super Bowl appearance are the most important things for the Bills. If they are playing at home throughout the playoffs, that's a big win. In fact, their only two AFC championship appearances with Josh Allen, they both were in Kansas City, and they lost both of those. Who knows what it would have been if they'd hosted the game. Sure, they also lost a game at home to the Chiefs in a previous season, but having that home field advantage at least gives you a better chance. And the Bills fans and that stadium make it one of the hardest places to play. So that is the thing that turns the tide of their season. They're going to win a lot of games, but they have to win more games than the Ravens, than the Chiefs, than any other upstart AFC team, because they need that home field advantage. And I think they will get home field advantage. I think this team is great, and they have a meaningfully easier schedule than their significant AFC rivals do. It's not as easy as the Patriots, who had the second easiest schedule, but the Bills is the fifth easiest schedule, and they're going to win a lot of games. I personally have them at 14-3. Even if it's 13-4, that exceeds their 12.5 win total, so I'll be taking the over. And there it is, the AFC East. This is still the Bills' division. They'll probably win it for a sixth time in a row. But the Patriots, they have a sturdy head coach and a promising young QB, so they're on the rise, and they might make it frisky. The Dolphins seem content to live on the razor's edge of Mike McDaniel's ability to innovate offensively, and that's a tough road to hoe, but hopefully they can handle it. And the Jets, if they do things right, and they can, will have a solid 2025, become good in 2026, and have a chance to really compete in 2027. So I'm looking to see if they lay the right pieces into place this year. Thank you so much for watching my AFC East preview. Again, you've made it this far, so it would mean a lot to me if you like the video and subscribe to the channel so you know when more videos are coming out. Doing these things also helps the algorithm get my video to more NFL fans like you. Next up, I'll be doing each of the West previews and then each of the North Divisional previews after that. So I'm excited to have you with me for those. Again, this was Light Boxes. I'm Rob Ballantine. Thanks for being here, and I'll see y'all soon.